Hi, I'm Owen, the host of the Australian Finance Podcast. This podcast is proudly sponsored by BetaShares, one of the leading providers of ETFs here in Australia. Serving thousands of financial advisors and over 1 million investors, BetaShares manages tens of billions of dollars on behalf of investors right across the country. I'm proud to partner with BetaShares on the Australian Finance Podcast, Australia's premier financial podcast, because there is great alignment in the long-term philosophy shared by both businesses. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Australian Finance Podcast. The government's new 5% deposit scheme is in full effect. We're recording this in early October 2025, and it is already having a huge impact when we speak to first home buyers around the country. Gemma, Mitchell and I are going to jump into this in today's episode, and we're going to keep it snappy and tell you exactly what you need to know. Gemma, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. Excited to get into this topic. We're already having so many questions about it. And as you said, it is causing quite a stir already. And we're recording this on the 10th day of the month.
Yeah, so it came out, it officially launched on the 1st of October. People have known that it was coming for many months. Effectively, it was a promise from the Albanese Labor government at the last election that something like this would come. They brought it forward to the 1st of October, and even with people in our own team here at Rask, the interest in it has been ridiculously high. And I know we've got some experiences and you got some experiences that we could probably lean on. First of all, Gem, what is it?
Okay, so traditionally when we think about home ownership, the banks want us to have a 20% deposit. That means the house is 100% of its value. We have 20% and the bank will secure against that, against the house. And so they're happy to secure up to 80%. They don't want to go over that because there's more risk on them. So if you had, prior to this, if you had a deposit that was less than 20% of the value of the house, the bank was a bit nervous about securing the whole amount. So they would charge you what was called lender's mortgage insurance, LMI. And it's an insurance that you pay the premium, but it does not protect you at all. It protects the bank if you default, the property value is dropped and they can't sell it for more than what they can't recoup all of their funds. So this is an insurance you pay the premium of. It's quite expensive and it doesn't protect you in any way, but it lets you borrow more than 80%. And there are some actual occupations that the banks are happy to increase that 80%. So there's like medical professions and stuff that they might actually lend up to 90 or 95 without that lender's mortgage insurance. But for most of us, lender's mortgage insurance will apply if we didn't have 20%. So the government has said property prices are acknowledged that property prices are outrageous, and trying to save a 20% deposit is very, very hard. So the government has brought in a 5% deposit scheme, whereas they will actually guarantee the difference. So you need to have 5% still, but they'll do whatever else, like they'll guarantee the rest of it up until that 20%. So the bank still is really comfortable with their 80 and you don't have to pay lender's mortgage insurance. So they're saying to the banks, all good, don't charge them that insurance premium. We'll chip in if trouble comes from it. Yeah. So 1st of October, big change.
So I could say 5% rather than 20%, which for literally any city in Australia or any house nowadays is normally $100,000 or more to get to 20% deposit.
Yes.
And sometimes hundreds of thousands depending on where you're buying.
Yep.
And I would also have to pay lender's mortgage insurance if I didn't get to that kind of limit. Like say I saved $100,000 and I needed $200,000, whereas the government's saying, no, we'll step in, dear bank, and cover that bit. But that does mean, if I'm not mistaken, that Gemma, someone needs, you'll end up with a 95% loan. Yes.
So this is where I think a lot of people overlook this. Like, it's not free money. You're not getting them to chip in. You are just having a higher loan. So all of your costs go up. And I acknowledge that this might be really great for some people, but from a cash flow perspective, that's what you need to consider as well. Could you manage an 80% loan? And how different is that 95%? And it might be that you find some middle ground. You know, you might actually do a 15% deposit and this scheme will still really help you. You might have the 20%, but choose to keep your cash with you as an emergency fund and safety. You just need to acknowledge that it's going to really impact your cash flow because your loan is going to be much higher because you haven't chipped in that extra.
Yeah, for sure. So in effect, even though the banks may say on their website like it's a borrowing power calculator, I love this because like everyone goes into those borrowing power calculators. So like I earn say $100,000. Put that in my calculator and it goes, now you can borrow $700,000. But then it doesn't mean that you should borrow $700,000. Like,
yes.
And then it's very easy to get emotional because then you're like, oh well, I could get that really nice house that's 700,000 or 800,000. When really maybe what you should be doing is $500,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
So why does this matter? Like, why does this scheme matter? There's so many first home buyer schemes, like at the state government levels with like stamp duty and even like there's been some, the federal government, the whole of Australia. Why does this one matter?
Yeah, so this one has actually been around for a while. It was previously called the Home Guarantee Scheme, but what is changed about it on the 1st of October, which is why everyone's talking about it, is it used to have a lot of restrictions. There was limited places, so you applied and you had to try and get a slot. It had an income cap on it, so if you earned over a certain amount, you weren't eligible for it. And the amounts of the value of the house that you could buy had to be under a certain amount. So they've increased. The cap has completely gone on your income, and the cap on how many people can utilize this has gone. So that is huge. So there's lots of positives in that if you're so close to buying a home, but there's some things that we're pretty worried about as well in terms of what it will do to the property market, which we're kind of already seeing that play out. So there's good and bad. And like with anything in finance, you can use it for good or evil. But yeah, this is a scary thing. I think a lot of people will utilize it, but I think we'll be seeing the knock-on effects for people's cash flow, but also for the price of the properties that they have to get. Like 5% deposit is suddenly going to be a lot more than 5% was before this was out. So there's lots of concerns around that. But as you were saying before, just because you can get, 700 doesn't mean you should. I always get people to go in the reverse, go, hey, actually do a budget, do a cash flow plan. Imagine you're in this house. What does rates, maintenance, all this stuff cost? What can you afford in a mortgage repayment? And then what does that equal in a loan? Because you're not suddenly going to get in this house and become a different person who doesn't want to go on holidays, just eats beans and toast. Like you want to actually make sure that this is a sustainable thing that you can be in. So if you're going to do your 5% or, whatever deposit under 20%, make sure you are looking at the cash flow implications, not what the bank tells you can borrow and that repayment, then add all the other stuff. You're now going to have rates, water, maybe body corporate, electricity, all this extra stuff that you might not have actually had as a renter. So it's not as easy as saying, oh, my rent's X amount, I should get a home loan as X amount. It doesn't work like that.
Okay. It's really good. So I'm going to quickly go through some of the limits of the property prices around the country. New South Wales, and they divide it by like the city, the major cities, and then they go regional areas. So if you're listening to this and you're in one of these areas, just take notice. We'll put links in the show notes to all this stuff. New South Wales, if you're in a major capital city, it is $1.5 million is the limit for this 5% deposit scheme. In a regional area, it's $800,000. In Victoria, it's $950,000. For a city, $650,000 outside a city. Queensland, $1,700,000 for outside the city. Western Australia, $850,000 or $600,000 if you're in a regional area. South Australia is $900,000, or if you're in a regional area, it's $500,000. Wonder if the Adelaide Hills counts as regional. Anyway, good part of the world.
Surely.
Tasmania, $700,000 if you're in or around Hobart, or I'm assuming Launceston or somewhere like that. $550,000 if you're on the other side of the island. Over in the territories, the Australian Capital Territory, or ACT, is $1 million. It's just for the whole place. Northern Territory is $600,000. Norfolk Island and those types of areas, $550,000. Christmas Island, $400,000. So I feel like I'm reading out the Brownlow medal votes or something like that. But basically, you have different limits that apply. And if you're buying in a major capital, like in a capital city or a regional capital, you may actually be eligible for more. Maybe it's worth mentioning just quickly, Gem, how Economics 101 works. And so what, in effect, happens is if someone like the government comes in and sets a limit on prices, they say you can go up to this limit. All of the sellers and all of the real estate agents then go, now everyone can spend up to $1 million in Queensland, or everyone can go to $1.5 million in Sydney. So what happens? I've seen this happen over the past month, and I was really, really, really negative about this policy when it came out. I basically blasted the Albanese government for even thinking that this would in any way help Australian society. And sure enough, all the people that were selling houses in September 2025 delayed the selling of the houses until October 2025, as in like the first 10 days of this month, and house prices have already jumped. According to the politicians, this policy was going to increase the value of Australia's houses by about 1.5% or 1% or something. But according to literally every other person in the world who had an opinion on this that was educated, they knew it was going to be like 5 to 10%. Because when you count the quote unquote value of Australian houses, obviously you're including houses in Toorak and Double Bay and farms that are worth tens of millions of dollars. Of course they're not affected because they're well outside the range. But for most of Australians, this is a significant thing. And so we've already seen house prices jump. In my area, house prices have already jumped as a result of this. Anything in this band? Gemma, have you seen this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We're already seeing it on the Sunshine Coast. And we saw a bit of a trend as well with people deciding when they would sell properties and things when this would potentially come in. So there's huge knock-on effects. And like if we think about how we strategically plan to build wealth, there's people strategically planning to get into property and there's people that are strategically planning to get out of it. And this is where those considerations come in.
So who's eligible for this 5% deposit scheme?
This is a very important part. So we know that the income cap has gone. So people that potentially weren't because they earned just over can now be eligible. But you have to be Australian citizen or permanent resident, over 18. And this is the key part that I think most people don't understand. Be a first home owner, buyer, or have not owned property or land in Australia for the last 10 years. So you might have been out of the market for a long time, but previously owned property and then you've gone through a divorce or you've changed your financial strategy or whatever it is. You are potentially eligible for this if you haven't owned property. So a lot of the time we see people discount grants and things like this, but they haven't dived into eligibility. They just read the title and go, oh, first home owner, I've owned before. But yeah, in Australia, last 10 years.
So one of the issues that I have with this policy is that if you do go through a divorce or you're a single parent, is you're competing against people that have a 5% deposit when you need 20%. But as you say here, if you haven't been in property for 10 years, you could be eligible for this. And so you have to apply for a principal and interest loan. So you can't do interest only. So that kind of rules out the people that might be looking to just get the maximum possible loan or in quote unquote investors that happen to be living in the house.
Yep.
And obviously there's a few other things, like you got to meet the criteria of the banks as well. Like Pete Wargent on our property podcast said, like it still comes down to what you can borrow. Like at the end of the day, if you can't borrow $1 million, you can't borrow $1 million.
Yes,
so that's based on your income.
This is the thing. So we were talking before we hit record that this is great for people that have the income and that can afford to borrow this and they just are struggling with a deposit. But honestly, in day-to-day, I see it with first home buyers that their issue is generally not the deposit, it's that they don't have the serviceability for the loan they need. And even people that have got into their first property, they might have built up a lot of equity and they're ready to do the next thing. They want to get an investment property. I see them not be able to purely from a servicing. I don't actually in my day-to-day see the deposit as too much of an issue. So where I'm worried about this is those people still can't potentially do it because of their serviceability, but now property prices have just gone up a lot higher. So I think there's good and bad of this, but I don't know how many people it will help from a serviceability. Like trying to get a loan for these properties, where do you get something for under, 6, 7, $1 million on the coast, 5% deposit, you now need a 95% loan. What income do you need for that? So I'm if I was a first home buyer and I'm seeing these changes, I wouldn't get too excited until I spoke to a mortgage broker about what my borrowing potential is, because you might easily get that deposit but not actually be able to service a loan in the bank's eyes.
So as we all know that listen to the show, the most important thing when it comes to getting a mortgage is your income. And the banks love to see good PAY income, like employee income, is better than, say, a contractor or something like that. They just tend to get more comfortable and they'll lend more quickly, or you'll go through the process quicker. If you run your own business, they want to see profits in your business typically for 2 years before they'll give you a loan. So these are some considerations that you should consider before, say, starting a business tomorrow.
Yeah. But before we wrap up, I think it's important to understand, because this is, yes, you have to save less deposit, which is great. If you've got that serviceability, great. But let's talk about how much you'd actually be saving. So the whole point of this is that you now don't have to pay LMI, lender's mortgage insurance, that premium to the bank that helps you get the loan but doesn't protect you. So an example of a $600,000 loan, if you had a 20% deposit, you wouldn't pay any LMI prior to this. Well, still. If you have only a 5% deposit, so instead of having $120,000, you now only need $30,000. Prior to this, you would pay LMI of about $24,000. That's a premium to the bank that you were paying that you don't get any value. So it's a sliding scale. So the more you had closer to 20, you'd pay less. So 600,000 loan, you're saving about $24,000. A 750 loan, you're saving about 33 grand. And a $1 million loan, you're saving about 40 grand in LMI if you now only want to do 5%. So it's huge.
Yeah, it's huge. So more people getting into houses sooner, as Anthony Albanese has said, which is true. Bigger loans, which is true. Higher and higher house prices now, which is true. And I guess the message that I probably want to leave to everyone here is this. If you're a first home buyer who was kind of considering getting into property in the next 3 years, speak to your mortgage broker today. Like literally, this podcast is about to end. Go to a mortgage broker and book in a call. They're absolutely inundated at the moment. There's a link in your podcast player. This is not just like shameless self-promotion, but we work with Alcove, who is available in your podcast player under mortgage broking. Just click that link and you can book in a free call to see what it means to you. And obviously mortgage broking is free because they take their commission out of the actual settlement. But so it's technically not free, but you get my drift. My message is like, if you are on the fence, you've really got to consider this because prices are going to move quickly up to the ceiling. And then the 5% deposit, yeah, it's going to be a thing. Like you're still going to have a 5% deposit, but you might find that houses are kind of jumping ahead of where you can actually borrow. So at least you're informed. It takes a few minutes. There's an eligibility calculator on the website as well, the government website. There's information. We'll include the fact sheet and all that sort of stuff. But get in contact. If you're seeing a financial planner, even ask them about it. They might be able to help out and see what you can and can't do. But there are some strings attached that everyone should know. So go in, dive into the detail. We'll include that.
Yeah. In the show notes, I have information from the First Home Buyers Government page. I've got eligibility tools so you can see if you're eligible. I'm going to put in the link to Perla's First Home Super Saver scheme information because they actually dive into if you want to use your super to help you save for the deposit. And like always, there's a plug in there for my book.
The Money Reset. And this is a good one for like people that you said, if you haven't been in property for a while, you've been through maybe a relationship breakdown, maybe even a death or just something as a reset in your life, grab Gemma's book. But this actually may work for you.
This might mean property's back on the table.
Yeah. And another two things is probably like Gemma mentioned the First Home Super Saver scheme. If you're saving the 60 grand to get to the 5% deposit, you can still use the First Home Super Saver scheme. That's a different scheme. You can still take advantage of your state-based incentives. So a lot of them have, like a lot of governments have, state governments have no, stamp duty. So look at what those numbers are. Don't go and spend $1 million and then pay all of that stamp duty. There might be incentives in your state.
You can scheme stack. Is that what
scheme stack? Yeah, well, scheme hack, like points hack, but you can scheme hack. But go and speak to a mortgage broker because they're probably the best person to speak to. Like I said, it's free. We'll include the link to Alcove in the show notes. So if you have any questions about the 5% deposit scheme and how you could stack all of the incentives together, let us know. Write in. There's a question link in there as well because this is a great opportunity and it won't be here forever for you to kind of put in place a rapid kind of acceleration into property over the next few years. Be wary of huge debt piles that you can't manage. Cash flow becomes important, but seriously, take notice of this. So Gemma, thanks for doing this short episode of the Australian Finance Podcast with me.
This is great. See you next time.
Thanks for watching this episode of the podcast. If you want to hear more from us, you can get daily videos and podcasts on Rask's YouTube channel. Or if you want to enroll in a free course on investing, property, business, money, you name it, you can join over 34,000 other students and enroll in a free course on the Rask website. Simply head to www.rask.com.au and follow the prompts. Thanks for watching this Rask podcast.